If you're drafting a fantasy football team this year and you miss out on the 5 players in this video, you might regret it. Because these guys are not your average sleepers. They're hidden gems who have paths to clear league-winning upsides if just a couple of things break right. You want to be drafting these guys, you don't want your league mates to get them. And if you're not familiar, I'm Sal Vetri. I've helped people for nearly 8 years win their fantasy league, and I plan to do the same for you with this video. And we're talking hidden gems. We're talking the guys who go in like the 13th or 14th round, and you can start here with Roschon Johnson of the Bears. Right now, he kind of shapes up as their RB2 behind DeAndre Swift. We'll get into that, but this might be one of the most misunderstood running backs in fantasy football. Yes, this is Roschon Johnson, the same guy who didn't even hit 40% of his team snaps last year that I'm recommending here because a lot of things have changed. Because despite being buried on a 3-headed backfield last year and dealing with injuries, he only played in 14 games, 12 of which he actually completed those games, and behind arguably one of the worst offensive lines in football, he was still able to earn 55 carries last year. He was still able, more importantly, to go out there as like the RB3 on a team, a poorly coached team, again with a bad offensive line, and play 28% of the snaps, 22% of the opportunities. Again, this is not great. We need more than that this year for him to actually be one of these hidden gems in the late rounds, but he was getting work in some of the worst situations last year. And despite that low usage, he actually scored 6 touchdowns. He ranked top 10 in fantasy points per opportunity because he was scoring touchdowns and the team trusted him in the red zone, which I kind of expect to be the case this year. And that's with a bottom 10 offensive line and an offense that just never really got going. Before Caleb Williams can start to get going, they changed coaches. DeAndre Swift took over. They just weren't playing as well, but now the offensive line looks a lot better. As you can see right here in the team changes tracker in the fantasy blueprint. Check out the blueprint down below or at jointheblueprint.com. You can see here Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney, Drew Thalman all added. In the draft, they added a second rounder in Ozzie Trolipo. So this is a good situation overall in terms of on paper, right? Once the games are played, we'll see how the unit actually gels together. But on paper, probably the most improved or a top 2 or 3 improved offensive line this offseason. And then you add in the fact that they drafted Colston Loveland, a tight end, the 21-year-old out of Michigan, with a top 10 overall pick in the first round. He's one of the grittier run blocking tight ends in the draft. He's a perfect combination if you think about like George Kittle in some ways, maybe a Trey McBride, but a better blocker in terms of athleticism, can catch the ball, but can also block in the run game. And then you layer in the rest of the offense. You have Caleb Williams, who everybody wanted to have, one of the best quarterback prospects we've seen in like the past decade last year, and now you're going to get him with a better coaching staff, right? You have this backfield right here with only DeAndre Swift being competition for Roschon Johnson. Some people who are deep in the weeds with fantasy and dynasty, or maybe they're playing best ball or just a fan of the Bears, no Kyle Monangai. They think that he can carve out a role. We'll see. I think these two players are ahead of him. If we scroll down a little bit more, you see the wide receiver room and just the overall talent has been elevated here. Rome Odunze entering year 2, DJ Moore, Luther Burton, and then of course Colston Loveland at tight end, and Cole Kmet should be somewhat involved, especially to start the year. I say all that to say this is an offense that should be able, behind that improved offensive line, to move the ball and sustain drives. And when you're doing that, you're getting to the red zones more, you're scoring a lot more touchdowns than they did last year, which is going to help the backfield, especially the guy Roschon Johnson, who was scoring touchdowns last year. And I touched on the coaching staff improving because Ben Johnson's coming over. The 39-year-old head coach was the most sought after offensive coordinator who's now going to be a head coach of the Chicago Bears. This is a guy who unlocked elite goal line usage for fantasy running backs in the past. I mean, just look at the past couple of seasons with the Detroit Lions. You're talking about David Montgomery the past 2 years being a touchdown machine. You're talking about Jamal Williams the year before that having like a 20 touchdown season. Here's a little bit more from Joe Orico over on Twitter. You can see he talks about Roschon Johnson. Ben Johnson's Detroit offense the past couple of games, 16 opportunities per game for Montgomery, 19 opportunities per game for Jahmyr Gibbs. That's 35 backfield chances each week. 35, right? Now, part of this is because they had a great offensive line. Detroit was able to take leads in games because of their overall offense, but that was a lot of it was architected, and it was by Ben Johnson. So the idea here is that maybe it's not going to be 35 because that's an insane number, but that the backfield is going to be split with multiple guys, 16 for Montgomery, 19 for Gibbs. The idea here is that maybe with DeAndre Swift, we see some sort of a split, and it might not be 16 touches like Montgomery had, but maybe it's like 10 to 12 for Roschon, which is a good starting point. Because when you break down the backfield, if you're going to tell me that like a 14th, 15th round pick is going to be seeing 10 to 12 touches a game in Roschon Johnson, we know he's a great pass protector. He can catch passes as well. He did that awesome during his time in college at Texas, and we know he's probably going to be used around the goal line or the red zone. This is a back that I think has some nice upside, let alone whatever happens with DeAndre Swift, right? Even if Swift stays healthy the whole season, Roschon can return value as a flex option, and if Swift goes down, that's where Roschon and what we think is an improved offense can actually start to break out and be that hidden gem that can win you leagues. So where I'm looking at it right now, Roschon goes as the 172nd overall pick in drafts. Again, this is like the 15th round of fantasy drafts. Odds are if you're in a league with people, he might even go later than that. People would probably come down here if they're not paying attention, and they'll just see names that they recognize, like Kareem Hunt or all these defenses that are down here, or maybe even Darren Waller, right? Like these names that they recognize more, they'll be taking over a Roschon Johnson, since he's basically done, outside of a handful of drives in games here or there, he hasn't really done much in terms of fantasy relevance in the NFL. But as we mentioned, his path to 12 to 14 touches a game is pretty clear. Like right to start start the season. If DeAndre Swift has a fumbling issue or he's just not producing like he wasn't early on last year, now maybe they give Roschon Johnson with a new coaching staff in there a little bit more touches. But either way, I think that we could probably be seeing 10 to 12 touches a game as like a 1B touchdown equity type play in this improved Bears offense. Roschon Johnson is the first guy that I want to discuss in this video. But the second guy, well, that's even deeper of a sleeper here, and it's Will Shipley, the Philadelphia Eagles running back. And I know Saquon Barkley is obviously there, so this is basically just a pure handcuff, right? A handcuff in fantasy football these days is a guy that you kind of want to have on your team, because if the starter goes down, well, this player, and in this case Will Shipley for Saquon Barkley, would become most likely the starter. Now that's not a guarantee, and we'll get into that, but most likely the starter in this Eagles backfield. And we know how good the Eagles backfield was last year. Saquon Barkley is an extreme talent, but of course he went for over 2,300 or so total yards. In past years, we've seen Miles Sanders have a ton of success in the same backfield, and then he left and didn't do anything. Somewhat similar case for DeAndre Swift in the past as well. So we can identify that it would be a good opportunity. And Will Shipley in college, this was a productive player. Back in 2022, his second to last season, he had over 1,100 rushing yards. You factor in his receiving yards of 242, and he had a 1,400 yard season, almost a 10% target share. Then in his final year before he comes out for the draft, he goes down a little bit. He dealt with injuries this year. He played 2 less games. He still goes over 1,000 total yards. This is a guy who can catch passes overall. The Eagles ended up taking him in the draft last year. I mean, in general, during his 3-year college career at Clemson, so he faced some tough competition. You're talking about a guy who had 3,300 yards, 33 touchdowns, and nearly 100 receptions as a running back. And the Eagles offense was so good that even in the postseason, they were blowing teams out. And you can see Will Shipley had 4 carries in the NFC Championship against the Washington Commanders. He goes for 77 yards and a touchdown in that one. He had the long 57-yard run. This is kind of where he broke loose on a big primetime stage. This is a guy who also in that game, he forced a fumble. He had an 88-yard kick return. He was a playmaker in the NFC Championship, right? They trusted him out on the field ahead of Kenneth Gainwell, who in that game only had 3 carries. Then they let Kenneth Gainwell walk this offseason as they wanted to give Will Shipley more opportunities. Or at least that's what you would expect, because they did go out and sign A.J. Dillon, who didn't play a snap with the Packers last year because he was injured. A.J. Dillon is now an aging running back who, outside of a couple of games here and there in the winter for Green Bay, hasn't really done much. Hasn't been an efficient back in like 3.5 to 4 years now. He's coming off of his own injury. He's joining a new offense where he doesn't know the playbook or have gel as much as Will Shipley, who was there during his rookie season and showed some success. So that is a good situation, especially when he's behind Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, who last year, including the postseason, had 482 touches. Some people are using this as a reason to say that Saquon is now all of a sudden guaranteed to get injured this year and you shouldn't take him in the first round. I don't believe that. I think it's a very small sample of running backs who have seen over 450 touches. And normally, if you're going to see a nearly 500 touch season like Saquon did last year, you're probably going to have regression just naturally. You're probably going to miss, like most running backs do, a game or two. You're probably not going to have another 500 or so touch season where you go for 2,300 yards, because that's probably going to be at the end of your career season. So yeah, we can expect some regression for Saquon, but that doesn't mean that he's automatically going to get injured. But we should at least mention that it was the 10th most touches ever by a running back, and if he was to miss some time, whether it was just a short stint of time or an extended period of time, that's where Will Shipley starts to become in play. It also helps that so far we're getting good reports out of OTAs, training camp, all these types of things about Will Shipley. You can see Philadelphia running back A.J. Dillon could be on the roster bubble during camp, according to a beat reporter here, because second-year running back Will Shipley has been a standout during team OTAs in camp so far. So that's just one report from one beat reporter, right? Of course, we're going to have a whole preseason to determine this and see how these guys look. I don't expect Saquon to really play at all outside of maybe 1 to 2 drives total. So we'll get to see A.J. Dillon, assuming he's healthy, and Will Shipley on the field in the preseason in an offense that ran one of the most times ever in the NFL last year. Top 2 in rushing yards, top 2 in rushing touchdowns, led the NFL with 621 rush attempts, 70 more than any other team, including the very run-heavy Ravens themselves, who had 554 rush attempts. So you can expect that this team that is going to be led by a mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts, who opens up running lanes for his running backs, behind, I would say, still the best offensive line, or at least a top 2 or 3 unit in football, you could expect them to continue to run the ball. So again, if Saquon missed time, Will Shipley steps into a nice role. So this is a pure handcuff. He's probably just not going to be owned in any of your leagues. As you can see right here, he goes as the 202nd overall player, and you might be saying, why would I even draft him? My league is only 16 rounds. Okay, I completely get that, but you might as well just stash him, right? If he doesn't end up doing anything, or maybe Saquon ends up starting the season off hot, right? But you might as well stash him for a week or two. If Saquon gets banged up early on and has an ankle injury and is going to miss 2 weeks, you don't have to go out there and spend 20% of your fab or more on Will Shipley. He's already on your roster as like your final round pick in the draft, 16th or 18th round, depending on your league. That's the type of play that we want to take here. So whether you're taking Saquon Barkley or not, if you're in a league that drafts for like 16 or 18 rounds, which I think is like the optimal rounds, right around 18, well, that's probably where your final pick should be going, to a guy like Will Shipley, who's a handcuff as of right now with a ton of upside. Okay, the next player I want to talk about is a rookie now, and Emeka Egbuka, the Tampa Bay Bucks first round wide receiver out of Ohio State, the 22-year-old, and this is a guy who has a lot of upside, but it's currently going unnoticed because of the landing spot that he landed on, the Tampa Bay Bucks. People know that Mike Evans is there, and they know that Chris Godwin, two proven proven veterans are both there. But for many reasons, I'm high on Egbuka, and we can start before we get into the deep parts of it about his competition. We can start just what he did in college. Back in 2022, this is a guy who had over 1,100 yards, a 26% target share, despite competing with some of the best wide receivers that are currently in the NFL right now while playing at Ohio State against tough competition. Okay, he gets hurt in 2023, but he comes back last year in 2024 while competing with Jeremiah Smith, who was already probably the best wide receiver in college football despite being a true freshman last year, and Egbuka still puts up over 1,000 yards. He earns a 25% target share or 24% target share while competing with Egbuka in a Power 5 conference with the Big Ten and a bunch of competition like Penn State and some great defenses that he had to face. But it's not just the production. If you look at the film, he's polished. If you look at just kind of the reports coming out during the combine and the draft, he had one of the best interview scores out there in terms of his football IQ. And in terms of the film, you can see the reception perception profile, the summary here from Matt Harmon, who makes these. He watches all the film. Be sure to follow him. Man coverage 68 percentile. Okay, with somewhat limited sample. You can see right here success rate against zone. This is where he dominated because he was a slot wide receiver, middle of the field often. That's great. 82nd percentile. Just kind of give you an idea. It's above average. It's above the threshold there. Success rate against press, very limited because he was mostly a slot receiver, although it was above average. This is a guy who showed strong hands on tape, as Matt Harmon notes there. And out of the slot, he was just a demon. He reminds me a lot of like Josh Downs when watching his slot tape as well. And Josh Downs entering the NFL has transitioned nicely to the outside and been an efficient receiver on his opportunities. Here's a tweet from Joe, again on Twitter, Joe Orco. You can check him out. He said, Emeka Egbuka, OSU wide receivers with 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons. There's Marvin Harrison, who was one of the best prospects, top 10 pick in not only real life last year, but a lot of fantasy drafts as well. And then there's Emeka Egbuka, career OSU record holder as well in terms of receiving yards and receptions. Emeka Egbuka, who was there for 4 years, he had production for 3 of those years. This is a guy who can step into a Bucs offense where there's 2 aging wide receivers, one of which, Chris Godwin, is already dealing with injuries and not practicing during training camp as of this recording. You can see Egbuka step in right away and find success. And let's talk about that a little bit more, because Mike Evans, sure, he's like the ageless wonder. Nobody wants to predict when he'll fall off, right? He has all these 1,000-yard seasons in a row, but this is a guy who's now 32 years old, and it very much could be this year. That's normally what we see. It's either at age 30 that the cliff comes, and if it doesn't come then, usually their age 31 season will be fine, or it's at age 32 when there's an increased chance that you're going to fall off. Just very small percentage of wide receivers, even the greats like Julio Jones and those names, who stay productive past age 31. Chris Godwin, like we mentioned, is already dealing with an injury, and as you can see right here, to start camp, Bucs wide receiver Chris Godwin is still recovering from a dislocated ankle, will not participate in team-related activities to begin training camp. Basically, to start camp, he's going to be rehabbing on the side with the trainers, and even if this doesn't mean that he's going to miss the first 1 to 4 weeks and be on the PUP list to start the season, which is still in the cards, at the very least, he's not participating in team activities to start camp, which only gives Emeka Egbuka more snaps and reps with the starters, which he was dominating during OTAs and minicamp. So much so that there's a ton of praise coming out about him. He basically became Baker's go-to receiver and consistently getting open in OTAs. Of course, Chris Godwin wasn't out there, and Mike Evans wasn't so much involved, so he was basically only competing with like Jalen McMillan and some other guys. That should be pointed out. But Baker Mayfield's already saying high things and praise after training camp about him. He's saying he's a luxury to have right now. I think he's going to be more than a luxury. People view him as like this first-round wide receiver pick when you already had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and even Jalen McMillan last year, and they view that as like a luxury piece. But now with Chris Godwin hurt and Mike Evans aging, he might be a necessity. In an offense that, even though Liam Cohen isn't there, we're going to expect a pretty similar offense in terms of pass first behind a quality offensive line. Hopefully Tristan Wirfs, their tackle, one of the best players in football, not just offensive lineman, is healthy, right? He maybe is going to miss the start of the season, they're saying. But the Bucs last year ranked 3rd in overall passing yards. If you go to their efficiency in terms of yards per attempt, they were 6th overall in the NFL. Anywhere that you look last year, completion percentage, if we can pull that up, 2nd in the NFL. All their passing metrics were fantastic. Total pass attempts in terms of volume, you can see right here as well. This was a team that ranked in the top 10 there. They were top 5 to top 10 in every single passing metric. There's going to be a lot of volume, a lot of yards for Baker Mayfield, and probably in general a lot of efficiency to go along with it. So yes, I do expect Mike Evans to be out there week 1. Chris Godwin, I'm not even sure if he's going to be out there week 1, and I would be projecting right now Egbuka to be playing ahead of Jalen McMillan. He's a much better talent, hence his first round capital compared to McMillan, who went in the 3rd round. Egbuka is a better slot receiver. Just, it should also be called out as well, in 3 wide receiver sets, which the Bucs should run a lot of this year, it's probably going to be Mike Evans and Godwin on the outside, where Godwin isn't as efficient in his career as he was in the slot like last year before injury, and Egbuka is going to be going into the slot because that's where he basically shined his entire college career, a lot like Jackson Smith-Njigba during his time at Ohio State. He was a slot receiver. He went to the NFL as a rookie, and for the first few years for the Seahawks, and was a slot wide receiver and found a lot of success. So because Egbuka is buried behind these 2 veterans, even though the context shows that it's actually a better situation than it seems, he's currently going as the 117th overall pick. He goes at the end of the 10th round of fantasy drafts right now, beginning of the 11th round. The wide receiver 49 in fantasy. I think there's a ton of upside here. He's a rookie and a tough competition spot, so it's making him fall down depth charts, and that's creating opportunity for you in fantasy. Now, the next guy we're talking about is not a rookie. He's a veteran. We're actually hoping for like a 50-year breakout out here for Josh Palmer as he joins a new team this year. And I actually want to talk about this one because it's interesting. Josh Palmer right now is being drafted outside the top 70 wide receivers in fantasy, except the fact that there's a decent chance he could be like the #1 outside receiver for Josh Allen and the Bills this year. Now I get it. Let's unpack it. You look at Josh Palmer. He played 15 games for the Chargers last year in his 4th season with the team, his final year of his rookie deal, and he only caught 39 balls for 585 receiving yards, just 1 touchdown. But if you dig a little bit deeper, he was actually a threat on his limited opportunities. He ranked 7th in the league in average depth of target, and he was top 25 in the NFL in deep targets. But despite this usage downfield and having a quality quarterback in Justin Herbert, he only had 1 touchdown, and that's likely to regress upwards, right? He might, in that same situation, should have probably had 3 to 4 touchdowns. And there's a world where he just sees more usage this year. We know Khalil Shakir is going to be the guy for Buffalo, right? But a lot of his usage, almost all of it, comes out of the slot. Outside of that, the starting 2 outside receivers are probably going to be Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer as of right now. We'll see what training camp and preseason says about this. Keon Coleman, they're going to give a lot of opportunities to, but he just wasn't great as a rookie. Did deal with an injury as well. Josh Palmer has shown flashes in limited time, especially despite being stuck behind legit receivers like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen during the early parts of his career. Other guys here are Curtis Samuel, a veteran who's getting a little bit older. There's also Elijah Moore, who I'm interested to see for similar reasons as Josh Palmer, what his role would be, because Elijah Moore, a former 2nd-round pick for the Jets, no matter where he's been, whether it was with the Jets during times with quality quarterback play, or even last year with Jameis Winston on the Browns, Elijah Moore has shown when he actually gets good quarterback play, he could be a factor in the offense in multiple different ways. So the same analysis that we're talking about with Josh Palmer can kind of just be copy and pasted onto Elijah Moore, whichever one wins that starting outside receiver role. I do think that it's probably going to be Josh Palmer based on skill set. Elijah Moore kind of overlaps in some ways with Khalil Shakir. And here's some more stats from Derek Brown over on Twitter. You can follow him about Josh Palmer. He basically says that he could quickly become Josh Allen's go-to wide receiver versus man coverage because last year, Keon Coleman, the rookie, again, he was a rookie on the outside, they targeted him 27% of the time against man coverage. So they were basically targeting him a lot. They saw one-on-ones, a man coverage, and they said, let's go to the rookie, or at least what we think is our best outside receiver. But the problem was that last year versus man coverage, he ended up ranking 71st as a rookie Keon Coleman amongst all wide receivers. So he wasn't able to win consistently despite getting a lot of targets. But last year on limited sample, Josh Palmer actually ranked 5th in separation and route win rate against man coverage. What does this all mean? It means that Keon Coleman last year wasn't good in the situations where Josh Palmer was, but he got a lot of volume. So now if you put Josh Palmer into that role, getting a lot of volume with success, it might mean upside in fantasy. Of course, there's the obvious, and we can say that Keon Coleman was a rookie who dealt with injuries, and now he has another full offseason, so we're hoping that he does improve, and that's true, but it's at least should be mentioned that he did not do well in this situation last year. Here's some more stats that just kind of show that separation that Derek Brown was talking about. Best average separation scores on vertically breaking routes in 2024, so just downfield routes is what we're talking about. Some of the best receivers in football: Nico Collins, Brian Thomas, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, and oh yeah, Josh Palmer. Yes, the sample was smaller with Josh Palmer, but it's not like it was only 15 to 20 targets. This is a guy who caught 39 balls. He had over 500 receiving yards. He had nearly 60 targets last year in a quality offense, and now maybe he could take another step forward in the Bills offense. So we're talking about hidden gems here, and this is a hidden gem who actually got paid this offseason. 3 years, $29 million. In terms of guaranteed money at bonus, nearly half of that money was guaranteed. 18 or 15 million at signing, 18 million by the time he actually suits up week 1. This is a significant contract. We're talking about a 3-year deal where nearly $20 million is guaranteed. So when I see Josh Palmer going as the 199th overall player, he's currently going, as you can see here in ADP, as the wide receiver 73, I say the same things I said about Will Shipley. I'm shooting for upside in these last rounds of the draft. There's no proven outside #1 wide receiver right now for the Bills. I think they're going to give their second-year player, Keon Coleman, a lot of opportunity, but if he doesn't come through, Josh Palmer has shown in the past that he can produce, and he's somebody that I'm targeting this late in drafts. I'm targeting Josh Palmer late, but if you want to see where my top 50 overall players rank this year completely free, you can check out my free fantasy rankings, the top 50 overall. It's linked down below, or just head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That will take you to this page where you just enter your email, and I'll instantly send you the top 50 overall rankings. Be sure to check your spam and promotional folders just in case as well if it's in there. Basically, this is going to be my top 50 players. They're going to be tiered, and it's going to show you the best and worst picks in every single round of those first 4 to 5 rounds, maybe the most important rounds of your draft. Now, if you're somebody who's really serious about fantasy and you would like my full top 250 rankings for your entire draft, all my other drafting tools, and my in-season tools, not just from draft day, but to championship week, that's exactly why I built the Fantasy Blueprint. It's what I use in every single one of my leagues, and over 10,000 people used in their leagues last year. You can check out the Fantasy Blueprint. It's linked down below. It'll take you to this page where you can just learn more, or you can go to jointheblueprint.com. It has all the information of what you will be getting with the Fantasy Blueprint, what you can expect if this is a right fit for you. But I will say that the pricing is increasing later on in August, and also there are limited spots left. We're already, because there's so much demand right now, about to hit capacity on the Fantasy Blueprint. So if you want in, now is the time. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is a running back. Let's go back to the running backs here and talk about another rookie in Bishal Tootin, the Jacksonville Jaguars 4th round pick, the second pick of the 4th round. So it's a little bit different than being like the last pick of the 4th round, right? He actually went as a somewhat priority pick on day 3. And this guy is one of the most exciting prospects to come out, just in terms of the type of player that he is and his skill set and how he wins on the football field. I mean, for starters, let's just look at this. He didn't even have 200 carries last year, and he was able to break over 1,100 yards, nearly 1,200 yards. He was averaging 6.3 yards per carry. He broke 70 tackles and was averaging over 4 yards after contact. Let me say that again. The second he got hit behind the line of scrimmage or maybe a yard upfield, he would then on average gain over 4 yards after that. Crazy. Here's another fun fact that you can see from Jeff Mueller. He points out Football Insights list in terms of college running backs over the last 2 drafts to average 3.8 yards per carry after contact and at least 1 receiving yard per route run. So these are highly efficient backs. Look at this list. Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Tyjae Spears, Bucky Irving, Audric Estime. The new running back on this list is now one Baishal Tootin. And you might look at this list and go, Audric Estime hasn't done anything in the NFL. And I would agree with you, but outside of that, you see Bijan Robinson, Devon Achane, Bucky Irving, all hits. Tyjae Spears, let's not forget, in his rookie year, he was top 5 in the NFL in yards per touch and split a 50-50 backfield with Derrick Henry. And then last year, he was highly productive when healthy. So you're talking about a list here out of these thresholds, yards after contact and receiving yards, so being able to run the ball and catch the ball efficiently. 4 out of 5 of these guys who have been on this list have hit in a major way. Yeah, Baishal Tootin also projects out in terms of an athlete like those 4 guys who have hit, not like Audric Estime, who wasn't fast. Because I don't know if you've heard, but Baishal Tootin is extremely fast. He was the fastest running back at the combine. He ran a 4.32 40 time, 98th percentile speed. His burst, his explosiveness, 97th percentile. Not only did he run a 4.32 40 time, it's not like he was 180 pounds. The dude was 206 pounds, so solid NFL size plus the elite speed is fantastic. And now he joins a Jacksonville backfield that, by all accounts, in my opinion, looks wide open with a new coaching staff coming in. That's probably just going to give the opportunities to the best running back here. And what do we know from past seasons? Well, as of right now, Travis Etienne, sure, he's dealt with some injuries in the past, but he really hasn't been all that efficient. Last year, this guy went from being the RB7 in fantasy points per game a year before that to the RB37 because he became one of the least efficient running backs in football. I'm talking outside the top 50, not like the top 20 or 30, top 50 running backs. So a bunch of backup running backs are in that, was where Travis Etienne ranked last year in yards per carry, yards per touch, broken tackle rate. Terrible. Now, in terms of his backfield running mate, Tank Bigsby, he was a little bit better on some parts, early parts of the season, but in general last year, Tank Bigsby was also not efficient. People will cite his first 2 to 3 games of the year before injury where he looked really good, but outside of that, he had fumbling issues. He couldn't catch the ball at all. There were stretches where he was borderline unplayable 2 years ago, and we saw some of those stretches last year as well. Like if you scroll down here, you'll see some encouraging stats, right? You'll see that he ranked 6th overall in juke rate. You'll see that his yards per touch was actually 4.7, but outside of his 2nd and 3rd game of the season, if you take those games away where he had 1 or 2 big runs, and I know you can't technically take them away, he basically looks like Travis Etienne in terms of efficiency, but a worse pass catcher with fumbling issues. And now you get a rookie in Baishal Tootin, who they're brand new, their young GM and James Gladstone basically said that Baishal Tootin's name was a priority target on day 3 during his 2 interviews with the Jaguars to become their GM. He said okay, if I'm going to be the GM, this is the exact type of player that I would be targeting for these reasons, X, Y, and Z. And then he got the opportunity to be GM. He's now the GM. And when the draft came, he went out there and spent a priority early 4th round pick on Baishal Tootin. Not to mention Liam Combs is now there, who turned last year a running back in Bucky Irving, a 4th round rookie running back, into a star. Now that doesn't just mean automatically that the 4th round rookie running back this year will be a star. They're 2 different players. They won in different ways in college, Bucky Irving and Baishal Tootin. But it does mean that Liam Combs, if he sees a running back has talent, he's not afraid to say, yeah, we're going to give Bucky Irving more touches than Rachaad White. Hey, yeah, we're going to give Baishal Tootin, assuming he looks good in the preseason and camp, more touches than these veterans who have been here because he just gives us a better opportunity on a per play basis. That's exactly what he did with Bucky Irving last year. And of course, a lot of people are going to point to this because Bucky Irving was great last year. The dude averaged nearly 5.5 yards per carry. On just 207 carries, he goes over 1,100 yards. I've mentioned this stat a bunch last year, but Bucky Irving totaled 1,500 total yards last year, despite not even playing 40 or not even playing 50% of the snaps. He only played 45% of the snaps. So if people come to you and say, this is going to be a 3-headed backfield, maybe, or maybe just 2 guys are involved, and even if Baishal Tootin's only playing 45% of the snaps, we saw that if you're efficient, you can still put up a 1,200 to 1,500 yard campaign. So when I see Baishal Tootin right now, he currently goes as a 12th round pick, the 133rd overall player. In a lot of your leagues, I think a lot of home leagues, he'll probably go even later as a 13th or a 14th round pick, assuming he doesn't have a couple of massive runs in the preseason, which would just skyrocket his ranking. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But Baishal Tootin right now is a 12th round pick from rounds 12 on, whether your draft is 16 or 18 rounds. Honestly, the best strategy in those rounds is to just shoot for upside. You get all your reliability in those first 6 to 8 rounds of drafts with a little bit of upside. Then just shoot for these upside backs and wide receivers later on in the draft, like we're talking about in this video, the hidden gems who can break your fantasy season. Now, those were 5 players, but I actually have a bonus one for you. Before we get into that, just hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Double check that you are. It goes a really long way in helping this content get seen by more advertisers or viewers viewers, and it just helps me grow the content, which lets me put out even more for you. So double check that you have that subscribe button hit. It takes 2 seconds, and we're trying to hit 200,000, which is a crazy number. But now let's get into this bonus player here. It's Marshawn Lloyd, the Packers, probably RB2 that we're going to talk about this year. This is a guy who, let's just face it, Josh Jacobs, we've seen it happen in the past. He's gone down just a couple years ago with the Raiders, and we saw Zamir White come in, who wasn't even that talented of a running back, and find a lot of success because they gave him a big workload. And now this is a case where we can see the same thing happen for one Marshawn Lloyd, except Marshawn Lloyd is a better talent, in my opinion, than Zamir White, and this Packers offense is a much better offense than that Raiders offense was a couple of years ago. And this isn't just some random running back. This is a guy who in his final year of college in 2023, he came out last year and he dealt with injuries a bunch as a rookie. He had 116 carries for 820 rushing yards. The dude was averaging over 7 yards per carry, but that's not all. He ranked first in PFF rushing grade, second in explosive run rate, and top 10 in broken tackles and yards after contact. I mean, this was a producer his final year of college, and then he went to the NFL Combine and he looked really good. I mean, first off, he weighed in at 220 pounds, which is just phenomenal. And then you go over, okay, he's fast, but he's big. Is he going to be fast? Yeah, he was. He ran a 4.46, which for his size was 93rd percentile, top 7% of any running back to attend the Combine. His bench press was at 25 reps. That's 87th percentile. So what does he have? He has the size, the strength, and the speed. That is a very rare combination for an NFL running back, and that's what he got coming into the NFL. Then he got third-round capital on a good offense. All things were looking good until he got injured last year. But now he's healthy. As of right now, all signs point to him being healthy. And of course, Josh Jacobs is the workhorse here. He's like a second or a third-round fantasy pick because he's so reliable, but he's going to see a big workload. And if he was to miss time, we're talking about a handcuff in like the final round of your fantasy draft here, like Will Shipley we talked about earlier. Marshawn Lloyd looks good. Emmanuel Wilson, an undrafted free agent, they liked is there, but they didn't have any other real options to give touches to besides these guys because A.J. Dillon got hurt before the year started and Marshawn Lloyd. And then there's Christopher Brooks, who on limited touches looked efficient last year, the former Miami Dolphin. But again, these guys don't have anything invested in them. The Packers spent a third-round pick on Marshawn Lloyd. They're going to be incentivized to see what they have in him. And in my opinion, he's a better prospect and player than Christopher Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson. And we're going to get to see that this year as the RB2 in the Packers offense, that even though Josh Jacobs was awesome last year, it's not like he was playing 75% of the snaps or 80%. He was still playing in most games like 55 to 60% of the snaps, meaning that the backup is going to see 30 to 40% of the snaps, where Marshawn Lloyd, just on those touches alone, can earn more volume just by being an efficient player if that's the case. And if he's not, well, then you spent the last round pick on him, just drop him. But the real reason we're interested in him is because if something was to happen, especially early on in the year to Josh Jacobs, a guy coming off of a 300 touch season, and the last time he came off a 300 touch season was back in 2022 with the Raiders, like we were talking about earlier, or 2023, where he ended up missing the final 4 games of that season, right? He had 13 games played. He missed the final month of the season. And when he missed that final month, Zamir White came in, and Zamir White ended up averaging the final month of the year, top 12 fantasy points per game, 114 total yards per game, 21 carries per game. Of course, that was a totally different player and a totally different offense, but it just shows you that when you get a guy filling in, he can produce, especially Marshawn Lloyd, a better talent, in my opinion, like I said, than one Zamir White, and in my opinion, in a better offense now than what the Raiders were 2 years ago. Like very quietly last year, the Packers ranked top 5 in rush attempts per game. Now, part of this was probably because you saw early on in the season, you could see 526 carries, only behind the Steelers, Lions, Ravens, and Eagles, who are known as run-heavy offenses. In my opinion, this is a little bit skewed because Jordan Love got hurt the final play of the first week. He missed some time. They brought in a mobile quarterback in Malik Willis. Jordan Love re-injures himself middle of the season. He plays through that injury, but they lean on the run more. But in general, Matt LaFleur will be pretty balanced, lean a little bit towards run-heavy in his career as an offensive coordinator and head coach. So we could expect a lot of carries, probably borderline top 10 once again this year for the Packers offense, which helps a backup running back who maybe could become the starter for a couple of games if one Josh Jacobs was to miss time. You can see right here, just like the other players we're talking about in Will Shipley and Joshua Palmer, Marshawn Lloyd comes in as the 200th overall player. He's currently being drafted outside the top 60 running backs in fantasy, despite, in my opinion, being like a top 10 handcuff as of right now. So another guy later on, the last pick of your draft that you could be targeting and just having on your roster to stash before maybe he becomes the waiver wire ad of the year. So there you have it. These are 5 hidden gems who can break fantasy this year if just 1 or 2 things falls their way, including a little bonus one for you as well at Marshawn Lloyd. Now, if you want more breakout players like this and really the best picks in every single round of your draft, again, you can check out the Blueprint right now. Limited spots available, so now's the time to join. It's linked down below, or you can head to jointheblueprint.com. So these are the hidden gems that can break your league if something goes their way. But if you want to see the 5 players who, if you draft them, it's going to break your league mates' hearts because they know you just got a league winner, you could check out this video right here. I think it's going to help you a ton this year in fantasy.